This is a tin box. It measures roughly 8 inches in length, 2 3/4 inches wide, and 1.5 inches depth. It could quite easily be a pencil box, but it isn't. The clue to what it is here on the front. And what it says is the Moldacot patent sewing machine. And amazingly, there really is a sewing machine in this box, as you will see when we open it. And there it is, a portable sewing machine designed for repairs on your travels. And it actually clamped onto any table, bench, any surface that you wish to clamp it to. Now the company that manufactured this was formed in 1886. The machine was actually patented in 1885, and the founders of the company acquired the rights to the patent in 1886, and they call the machine the Moldacot, that being formed from the surnames of the two founders. They didn't actually produce the machines themselves, the company. They farmed that out to various engineering companies in Britain and Germany. A few weeks after the first company was formed, they formed a second company to market the machine worldwide. And they described it as the latest marvel to be exported all over the world, and so wonderfully simple a child could use it. They also projected that they would probably be able to sell 1 million machines in the first year. Not unreasonably, investors were very keen to put their money into this fantastic device that was going to make 1 million machines, and the share issue was oversubscribed in only a very short time. However, the promises were not really kept. To start with, the machine never really worked. About 1% of them actually stitched. The rest of them were just ornaments, really. And so they weren't terribly popular. And despite the high numbers you get on some of them, there were nowhere near 1 million made, probably only tens of thousands. Their problems with the were mainly design faults, and the directors of the company didn't really seem to bother about that. They just kept making improvements without addressing the basic problems. They just blamed that on the manufacturers. There were some manufacturers in Britain and some in Germany, and they were all engineering companies. I don't think they'd ever made sewing machines before, but they were well reputed engineering companies, so it's probably unlikely that they were making mistakes. It's more likely that they were making them exactly as the design they were given. However, it was not a success, and the first company was liquidated in 1887, and at that time the second company, the global company, changed its name and carried on trading. Although they weren't actually having any machines made, they were selling off the stock that they got, but that went into liquidation in 1888, and the surplus machines went to auction and were sold to, well, for whatever price they could get for them. On liquidation, it was discovered that the original founders of the company had actually stepped back and had nothing to do with the company itself, but were drawing monies in the form of patent fees and royalties from the main company, and it's suspected that all the investors' money, all the shareholders' money, disappeared into their pockets. Certainly one of the founders had already been involved in a fraud before he moved into the sewing machine world, and afterwards he went on to perform other frauds. So there's probably little doubt that this was a company that was formed purely to milk investors of their money. And the machine itself came like this originally, with no hand wheel, just a plunger on the top, and you can see there it's got a return spring. So the plunger presses down, bar down, you can see the needle coming down there, look, and then when it gets to the bottom of its travel, you let it go and the spring takes it back again. Now all the mechanical movements, the shuttle carrier and the walking foot, are operated by the movement of the needle bar. So you see here, if we hold this up close, as the needle bar comes down, there's a screw there which is attached to the back of the needle, to the bottom of the needle bar, moves down that curved slot, look, in the shuttle carrier, like so, and causes it to move in an arc backwards and forwards like that. Likewise, the walking foot is mounted on a lever arrangement here, a sort of curved lever, which at the top of its, when the needle bar is at the top of its travel, that lever bears on this square here that the needle is mounted onto, and pushes the foot forwards to underneath the needle. And as the needle bar comes down, the bottom end of that lever that the foot is mounted on comes into contact with that same projection on the needle bar, and the foot moves backwards, like so. And on the side of the walking foot here is an adjustment screw which comes down onto a lever of the walking foot lever, and by adjusting this screw you move the cam into a different position, and that gives you the different stitch lengths. Now, as regards the problems with the machine, the first one I've come across is the instructions which are printed on the inside of the lid say that you should push the needle bar all the way down until it reaches the stop at the bottom there. Now if you do that, when it reaches the bottom, the carrier for the shuttle comes right outside the plate here, and if you're actually using a machine, the shuttle comes flying out and you lose it somewhere on the floor. Not only that, when you let the lever go, when you let the knob go at the top, this is jammed in place. Clearly pushing it all the way down to the bottom is not a good idea. And in fact, later on when they actually devised this handle, the length of this link is such that the needle bar can never quite reach the bottom. So presumably that is how they got round that problem. Now I'll just attach the handle to the machine. So it attaches like this. A screw passes through there and is screwed into this top hole on the frame. And this screw goes through here, screws into that hole there in the bottom of the needle bar. Like that. So there's the handle, well the actual rotating part of the handle in place, and then the actual handle part screws in like that. There we have it, the whole thing with its handle on. And I don't know, we can just demonstrate when the handle is turned. Now when the needle bar reaches the bottom of its travel, it isn't actually touching the stop at the bottom. Now this, as I said before, is a walking foot mechanism for advancing the cloth. The cloth actually runs from the back of the machine to the front of the machine, which is the wrong way round for most sewing machines. And what actually happens is that the walking foot goes backwards like that, and then as it comes forward it engages with the cloth and moves it forward. So it isn't so much a walking foot as a kicking foot actually. To get the cloth into the machine initially, of course you have to lift the foot. That's this little projection here, and you lift it up and turn it, and that holds it up in place until you're ready to start sewing. The whole of the machine is made, well, most of the machine anyway, the framework is made of brass, which is nickel plated, and this spring is actually a lot longer than it looks. It goes right down inside this tube here, and is probably 25% longer than that distance there. And that's another problem you get when you try to put the thread on, because the thread goes, the thread reel goes onto that tube, fits down there. I'll just show you that. When you take the knob off the top, you have to take the knob off the top, and it's advisable to hold the spring, otherwise it shoots up like a jack-in-a-box and comes off the machine straight away. So you take that off, and the nut, you take this one off, like so. You pop your cotton reel on, and then back that goes. On goes the spring and down the tube. And then we have to compress it so that we can get the knob back on. And there we have it. Now there's another slight problem, in as much as the cotton reel has to be a low profile one. Because a standard cotton reel won't go on. It comes right up here somewhere, which means you can't put the nut on. Now that wouldn't be a problem if you were putting a different cotton reel on each time. But if you were, for instance, travelling and you wanted the cotton reel to stay on, you've got to have a low profile one, otherwise you can't tighten the nut down and hold it in place. The other problem with this is the threading of the actual machine. The thread has to go through this eye, that eye, through the tension discs, down to this guide here, back up to the take-up lever, there, then to this guide here, and finally down to the needle and through the needle eye. When you want to take the shuttle out, you turn the needle bar down to its bottom, down to the bottom position, and then you pull this lever out and move it over like so, and that reveals the shuttle there. And in the bottom of this shuttle carrier is a little button there, which is actually sprung. And when the shuttle's in place, that pushes the shuttle up against the back of this plate. And the needle, when it goes in, comes down behind this plate, actually into a groove in this plate, and the shuttle then slides across in an arc, backwards and forwards across the needle. Now the shuttle itself is incredibly small. There's my fingernail and there's the shuttle. Now obviously this actually is a standard sort of pointed type shuttle. Well, I say standard, it's a lot shorter than a standard shuttle. But of course, being so small, there is no room for the normal spindle type bobbin. So what we have here is a tiny round bobbin which has to be pushed out by inserting a needle or a pin into that hole and pushing it out. The reason it won't actually fall out is because the tension for the lower thread is via the mounting for this bobbin. It's actually mounted onto a tube inside the shuttle which is split down its centre, and by using a small screwdriver bit, very small, something like a jeweler's screwdriver, you ease the two halves of the tube outwards so that they grip the inside of the bobbin. That gives you the main tension. And then you've got sort of ancillary tension here in the form of 3 holes that you pass the thread through to get extra friction from the outside of the shuttle. When you want to wind thread onto the shuttle bobbin, you have to place the bobbin onto this little bent handle thing here, and then you put it into this hole here, and then just wind your thread onto the bobbin. Obviously when this is belted onto the table, you're holding it with the thread with your other hand and guiding it up and down the bobbin, because there's no automatic layering. You have to do that by yourself. Now this is where there's another problem with this machine. When you set the needle up, it goes into the clamp here, and according to the instructions, the needle bar has to be brought down until this hole here coincides with a hole in the needle bar, which you can't see, of course. And then you take this winding device and you put it through this hole into the needle bar. Unfortunately, this hole that the winder goes into here is larger than that hole, which you're supposed to use for setting up the needle, so it won't go in. So the only thing you can do is to find a slightly smaller rod and feed that through. And then when you've got the needle bar and the frame locked together at that point, then you adjust the needle so that the eye is just inside the cloth plate, and that should be the right position for sewing. Now I did come across a slight problem with this, or 2 slight problems with this after I bought it. Firstly, this clamping screw, needle clamping screw, appears to be not the original. It's slightly too thick. The head of it is too thick. And when it came up to the top, the needle bar was actually stopping too soon because the head of the clamping screw was hitting the tension discs here. I've got round that temporarily by packing the tension discs out with a couple of washers so that the head of the screw goes behind them. Whether that will be a sufficient modification in the future is another matter. I might have to find a screw with a slightly thinner head. The other problem I came across was that this bottom thumb screw from the handle had sheared off right there, and the whole of the thread from the screw was still inside this hole. Now, some previous owner had tried to get it out by sawing a cut across it to form a slot for screwdriver, and unfortunately that has resulted in damage to the actual frame, and it only produced a slot, well, barely a slot. It definitely wasn't deep enough to be able to get a screwdriver into it. Well, you could get a screwdriver in, but it wouldn't turn the screw. So I was faced with having to drill that out. Having drilled it out, I then somehow got to either get another thumb screw like this or make one in some way. I discovered that this hole is very close to a modern M3 hole. The difference being that the thread pitch is slightly different. And I tried an M3 screw into it, and it went in all right, but very, very tight. So on the off chance that that would work, I actually drill the shank of this thumb screw down the centre, the full length of the shank, tapped it out to M3 and put an M3 stud in it, locking it in, screwing it up tight and locking it in with some glue. And then, so that the glue wouldn't fail when I tried to screw it in, with this being a very tight hole, I just ran my M3 tap through the hole here, just to reform the pitch of the thread slightly, and that seems to have worked. Now I want to see if I want to show you whether it stitches or not. I don't know whether it does. Apparently only about 1% of these machines that were made actually did stitch. The rest of them were just junk. But I'm not going to bore you with threading it up because it takes me so long, being a small machine and me having very unsteady hands, that it'll take more time than it's worth. So I'll break off at this point and I'll be back with you when I've got it threaded up, and we'll see if it stitches. Okay, so I've now got the machine all threaded up, and I've got some cloth in the machine, and I have to say I've done a few stitches already, just so that I don't make a complete fool of myself. So here we go then, let's see how it goes. And there we are. I'm no sewing expert, but I would say that's a reasonable result. And just to show you how fiddling this thing is, so it comes off the bobbin here and it goes through that top loop there, that one there, round the tension discs, down through this one here, up to there, through this guide here, and then to the needle. And I can tell you it's no easy job. Certainly not the sort of thing a child could do. Thanks for watching.